I really love these Dharma dialogue forums. We've been doing them for a while, and I know most of the people on the call, but not everybody. And when we do these dialogues, it's a chance for not only for newer people in the practice to get different perspectives on practice and people's life paths. The special qualities of each person's path. Some resonate with some and some resonate with others. But for those who, know us and have known Jodo even for years, this format, I think, offers a level of familiarity and intimacy that, you might not have known, even if you've known him for years. So we've got a nice little format here. So welcome, Jodo. You have I've known Jodo for about 14, 15 years. We were Dharma brothers together studying with Shishin Roshi. And then I left that center after getting transmission. Jodo, I think, practiced with the Great Mountain for a bit more. And then he can say more about his practice path from there. But I've known him for a long time, and he's been a student with me now for the last 4 years or so, perhaps it is. Yeah, at this stage in this practice. So our theme that the One Body's talking about here is, I think, practice. What is practice? What is practice? Which is a really good question. So that'll be the question that kind of holds and frames, our discussion. It might go down highways and byways, and like Sokyo said, feel free to put questions in the chat or just raise your hand. Give us a few minutes to get some momentum, and then at a certain point you can raise your hand and it'll become interactive. So Jodo, let's start from the beginning, from the beginning, the beginning of your practice. Right? What brought you to practice, and what was those early forms of practice, and what did it give you? What did it mean for you?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you everyone for being here. I think the first thing that comes to mind is just that even when I was pretty young, I remember asking questions of myself, like, what is the meaning of all this? And I wasn't feeling very happy in a lot of my young life, and I remember asking, my family, what would what would bring happiness and how would happiness occur? And their answers to that were understandable and good, but not satisfying deeply. So as I grew up and didn't feel very happy, I was going through lots of things when I was younger: depression and anxiety, and a lot of loneliness, and lots of different forms of suffering. Eventually, it became clear to me that I needed to turn to something like the Dharma. Specifically, I guess I had some experiences with LSD that precipitated a kind of awakening, which was also destabilizing, but helped me to see that there would be a path with meditation. And so from there, I actually became really pretty focused on it. And went through some more explorations, which I can talk more about, but eventually found my way to Naropa University, because I understood that that was a place where I could learn some meditation and, things of that kind. And it felt to me at that time like I felt like I needed legitimacy, and from my parents' point of view, which was around academia. And so I didn't think I could just go and be a meditation student. I felt like I had to have some sort of, degree or something like that. So Naropa felt like a kind of loophole where I could start to explore meditation and Buddhism, and also be getting this degree that would satisfy what I thought they might want. As I continued through Naropa, I started getting more interested in finding a teacher, and then you know kind of wandered from a couple different Zen centers because Zen really appealed to me. At Naropa, meditation style is Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhism. The place was formed by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, which that style of Dharma was very appealing and very interesting to me. But it also had so much going on, so many different sort of practices and things that I found it a little difficult for me, just me personally, to feel like it got to the heart for me. But when I learned about Zen and felt that it was like really throw yourself directly into just sitting, and that is like the beginning, middle, and end in some ways, that really appealed to me. And so I felt like I wanted to just dive in that way. So I kind of first sat with Cliff Clusen Jodo, actually, his name is Jodo, um, at his Prairie Mountain Zen Center for a year or so, and heard about Shishin along the way, and then came to one of Shishin's talks and actually met Karen Kemp that evening. And is it Karen Kemp? Is that her? Yeah. And I was asking her, like, I don't know how to find a teacher. I'm confused about this. And I had this feeling like I was supposed to find some magical teacher, this thing that would click, and it would be this like, oh, this is my teacher. But she had some really good advice, which was, well, maybe just find somebody who you feel like is a good enough fit. And in that experience, I said, okay, yeah, Shishin, and I met you that night as well. And I remember your greeting me was very friendly, and I remember both of you feeling very, um, receptive and interesting. And so I decided to start studying with you guys.
Mm, okay, good. Um, I didn't know that about your going to Naropa to get, you felt you needed that academic validation, which is really interesting. Maybe just to probe that a little bit more. Um, you know, um, Jodo and I, we grew up actually about 50 miles from each other in Connecticut, about 15 years apart. I think it was, I think it is. And we have something of a similar path actually, in that I also had psychedelic experiences which precipitated my pursuit, which had both positive and negative qualities to it. And Jodo mentioned being destabilized. I also was destabilized for a number of years, so seeking meditation was almost, I needed to do it because of the what had been stirred up actually in my mind, but it also was a precipitant to go deeper, even after I had stabilized my mind. My path, I didn't feel like I needed validation from the academy because I had already gone into graduate school studying English, and I kind of saw through the veil of academia a little bit, that kind of model. And then became a resident at Zen Center of Los Angeles in my mid to late 20s. But it's interesting that you were brought there to because you felt you and maybe for your parents needed that kind of formal validation, but you stuck with it and you did a whole program and now you're a therapist. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm curious about that part of it, like
Mm-hmm.
what you got, how the path sort of maybe morphed in that way.
Yeah, yeah. So I felt I needed to achieve a certain degree of academic success for my family. My family is very academic.
Mm.
Both of my sisters have PhDs. My mother has a PhD, and my father worked at Yale and Wesleyan in administration for many years. And there was a sense for me that that was important. Um, but I did enjoy education, and I did enjoy, especially psychology. And when I went to Naropa, I had already had an interest in psychology, but I started to feel like, okay, maybe I could actually really pursue being a therapist, and be interested in Zen and in Buddhism. And I had a friend who encouraged me. She wanted to go to the grad program, and she was like, "Hey, I want to do this. You should do it with me." I was like, well, I don't know. I feel like I've kind of graduated undergrad, but then something about the way she was talking about it made sense to me. And it did seem like it was going to be a deeper dive. There was going to, so it was I ended up taking the Buddhist psychology and contemplative psychotherapy program in the master's program at Naropa University, which has a lot of retreats and has a lot of Buddhism and has a lot of community and has a lot of, you know, direct encounter with yourself through the group experience. And a lot of that appealed to me. And it just seemed like a great way to continue developing in all ways. I wanted to develop both in the meditation sense or whatever that means at that time, but also I wanted to just hit it from every angle and kind of see if I could explore myself interpersonally and therapeutically. I was very invested in my own therapy process in those days and still am. And enjoy just processing and being in the psychotherapeutic, but also just really presence oriented psychotherapeutic lens. And so, yeah,
Hmm.
both of those things felt very appealing to me.
Okay, great. Great. I want to stay with this theme of validation. It just kind of it feels important. Um, so you, in a sense, you got a certain level of validation from that, but I think you realize that the validation changes. So I'm curious. This is really an open question. What kind of validation do we need? I think validation is very important all along the path. I think we
Mm-hmm.
need it. We need it from externals, and then ultimately we need it from internals. So how do you see it? How important is it? And in Zen, where with your path, where have you gotten it, and where have you been challenged with it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think for me, kind of almost developmentally, validation became a really kind of core wound and core need in my psyche as I was growing up because it was kind of far and few between, and just the hunger for it was really strong in my emotional self. So I've really kind of suffered with that for a lot of my life. And in practice, it was easy for me to seek it in a very similar way, right? So for the many years and still, there is this tendency to try to externalize the source of validation into teachers and community and so on and so on. And while I do think there is a place for some kinds of validation from outside, I mean, of course, if someone's giving you feedback, these are important things sometimes, and there's ways to kind of work with that or integrate that, and it's not like it's something to be completely dismissed or anything like that. But um, slowly over time, I started to be willing to validate myself. I remember really one of your teachings that really even one of the first retreats in the GMZC, Great Mountain Zen Center, you, I think, told me at some point you have to give yourself the Dharma seal. And I didn't really understand what that meant for a long time. Um, and I'm like, well, how can I? Because I'm not a good enough person or something along those lines. And over time, I think there becomes a way in which we can turn inward and really actually see that no one can validate who I am. There is no one who could even know what it is to be me aside from me. And what could, how could you validate what I'm experiencing in this moment? There's really no access, in a sense, to this, personal or this intimate side of things. And so I think in our practice, we learn to really embody that or feel that and experience that it's just not possible to get that final confirmation from anywhere else.
Mm. Yeah, thanks, Jodo. That's a really intimate and vulnerable share, and you reminded me about that phrase, which reminded me about kind of my evolution with the same question, and I realized I was strongly looking for validation, yeah, for who I was and for my path, early in the path. But I had a very conflicted relationship with it, is that I desperately was seeking validation from others, authority figures, parental figures, friends, everybody. But at the same time, I also was probably ashamed of wanting it from other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I was inwardly conflicted. So I pushed people away, but I secretly wanted their validation.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, does Zen practice really shine a nice, warm light on this matter, which does come from wounding. And I remember being, right in the middle of that self conflict early in my practice, and I became a resident at Zen Center of Los Angeles. And I remember it was Maizumi Roshi who gave a talk about the seals, putting the Dharma seal on yourself. And I was very early in my practice. I didn't quite understand conceptually, what he was saying, but it just lit me up. It lit me up when he said, you have to put the Dharma seal. You have to validate your own life completely. It just rang in my soul. And it was one of the things that kept me going. So that was Maizumi Roshi speaking through my mouth, probably the whole lineage speaking through my mouth, and now you're using those words. But it is it's challenging, isn't it? Because the structure is designed to give you enough validation to keep you going, but also to continually push you back on yourself, so that you're not relying upon those externals, but to give you enough of the external validation to encourage you, to keep going. So you talked about the start of your practice, and then maybe the little bit of the middle of your practice. So where are you now with your practice? What keeps you going? What does your practice mean to you?
Mm. That's interesting. Yeah, so I was actually kind of reflected on this morning. And there was in the past this desperation driving practice. There was this really, really uncomfortable feeling of I'm not good enough and therefore I must practice. I remember being in fear, really, truly, if I don't. Uh, this is all very like my ideas at the time, but if I don't get enlightened, what was the point of this life? I am so scared to, you know, not be clear. And it was a really powerful fear, which sometimes was validated actually by reading things like Hakuin and Dogen and other teachers who have had some of those feelings, I think. And so there was this pressure and this need for to get somewhere and to have something and to be free of something. And much of my practice had this feeling of drive and painful drive, like this sense of, oh my God, I have to. And it's like not, yeah, it's not a very comfortable feeling, but it was really the way it was. And in the past number of years, there has been a softening of that, and it feels much more comfortable to not mind, to not worry about enlightenment or delusion, and to begin to just be with what is. Finally, feels like to the years of those feelings, those sufferings. It's like, oh, this already really is whole and complete. How can I just experience it as much as possible? And so practice now becomes a a way to experience that, right? Like it's already here, it's already whole and complete. But if I don't um, keep with practice, it's not likely for me to be able to appreciate it. And I want to. I love to be alive and to feel what it feels like to feel happy, sad, and all the other amazing and horrible emotions, which sometimes are hard to feel, very hard to feel. And so that's when practice is almost the most rich, is like, okay, so there's something here that my consciousness wants to push away and wants to make other and wants to be free of. How can I really be with it as it is and learn and let it show me how it is also included in this kind of wholeness and completeness.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I'm going to keep going with Jodo here, but we can open it up. So I can't see everybody in the thumbnails. So if you have something to offer, question, or share, pop something into the chat, and I'll see it there. So it sounds, Jodo, like your practice is almost like breathing for you now. It's like you can't really imagine.
Yeah, definitely. It,
Yeah.
it does feel like it has slowly and more integrated into out throughout a whole day. You know, it's just more and more like, okay, it's sitting, but it's not limited to just sitting.
Yeah. So maybe you can kind of express how you experience this. One way that I've put it over the years is we don't fit our practice into our life; we fit our life into our practice. And
Hmm.
for those who, haven't heard that before, it's a difference between a mindset that says, well, my practice is a formal meditation practice, and it takes this amount of time, and I need to do these things, and I got to find a way in my schedule, in my lifestyle to fit that practice in. Well, that's where you start. Everybody kind of starts with that kind of mindset, but the way it can deepen and should deepen is to feel that the practice is actually the basis. That's the main thing, and that's a deeper thing than just your biological life. Actually, it includes all beings throughout space and time. It includes your depth of spiritual experiences that are deeper than or above and beyond the ordinary, and it permeates the everyday. But it's an invitation to kind of think of your life in a much bigger way, and now you're fitting your life or your lifestyle into that bigger vehicle, that bigger process, that bigger being, that bigger unfolding. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. How that is for, if it is that way for you, and I know it is. How is it for you now?
So, yeah, I think you kind of articulated it pretty well. But yeah, fitting practice into my life is different. Maybe you said enough about that. But now to include my life into my practice, it's really what comes to mind first is just noticing any way in which my mind creates a division between my life and my practice. That this unfolding of reality includes everything. Of course it does. How could it not? And yet it can so easily seem as if some things are it and some things are not it. But it's the I think one of my favorite places of practice, which is one reason I'm glad I left the Zen Center when I was living there and had ordained as a monk and all of these things, is that I'm in this wonderful, profound relationship with Lindsay, my wife, and how relationship, and I can feel just my feelings for that, just wonderfully challenges and rewards constantly all of the ways in which I am or am not fixated and attached, and that this, you know, really close experience of being with someone where you share so much of life brings out all the good and all of the not so good. And I enjoy having that be this teacher, this place of always kind of being able to relate to my confusion and delusion and whatnot. And so it's in that, and it's in, going to work and doing my best to serve my clients as a therapist, and on and on. And I just want it to include everything. So it does, and whether or not I always appreciate that, but yeah. Does that kind of get to the
Yeah,
question?
yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. I mean, I probe you just a little bit deeper on it, and I see Tetsuji, your question. I'll get to that in a moment. But you mentioned there at the beginning that there sometimes it doesn't feel like they're this compatible. Like there's a difference, and I wonder if you could kind of give an example of a moment when that feels that way, and then what you do with that.
Mm-hmm. What comes to mind first is something that is not as up for me lately, but I would used to feel this pretty strongly. Would be like every once in a while, I'd be like, oh no, my practice is feeling a little shabby. I need to go and make it stronger. And in that moment, I can feel myself try to push away or, pull away from certain things, certain stimuli or whatever, certain objects in my environment, and that I would need to kind of almost cloister or some weird thing like that. Nowadays, is feeling much more like letting go of that is actually the practice, letting go of the idea that there's somewhere else to be. And so that kind of fades away. In that sense, I haven't been really experiencing it a whole lot like that recently. And that even when I'm in like a argument with my wife or with a friend or something, I can feel like this is a great place to be practicing. This is exactly where practice unfolds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's such a rich kind of area and a key moment in our practice. And with my own path, I kind of had my priority such that domestic kind of family life in terms of wife and kids, I very much subordinated to my practice for most of my life, up until just about 10 years ago. And then I, met my now wife and inherited 5 stepkids. And so there was a lot of opportunity for me to kind of have all of these family responsibilities that I had avoided for a long time. And now I had to, all right, how does this really feed my practice in the broader sense? How do I work with this? And, part of my mind oftentimes would be, I don't want to be doing all of these family things. I want to be practicing or leading my center or doing work with the Sangha. But each time it was a stepping into, well, this is it. This is it. And to really recognize, and it only took me 5 seconds. It's not like I was fretting on these things, because I've known that I had to, open up the stream of my practice, to include everything. So Tetsuji, let's give you the microphone. And what's your question?
Thank you. I remember a few years ago, Sensei, when you told me you can't fit your practice into your life, you have to fit your life into your practice. I was angry and I rejected that. And I said, that's not what I'm here for. That's not what I want out of this. And I basically, I think I left. I didn't see you for a year or so. It was hard. And I've come around, and I'm still struggling with that. It helps me in some ways to recognize that practice is my life. And that has helped me to understand and to see the depth of the issue. Jodo, it so impresses me that the depth of your practice, your practice with your education, in your master's degree, it's your profession as a therapist. It's so deeply embedded in your life. you live it in a much more fundamental way, it seems to me, certainly than I, and I think many of us as practitioners, and I admire that. But I'm curious. In addition, you went to live in the abbey. You basically went to the abbey and you lived there for a few years, and then you left. Could you talk about why you went, what it was like there, and why you left?
Sure. Well, what when I is it's actually kind of a little bit funny. When I graduated in Europa, my girlfriend at the time, who I'm very good friends with at this point, she's actually about to have a baby. Uh, we broke up, and as soon as we broke up, I realized I wanted to go live at the Abbey. And so I called up the Roshis and I asked them if I could, and they said yes. And uh, I was just so wanting of that experience and was very happy about it. But I also want to say, when I got there, I was really frustrated that it wasn't like a, idyllic experience. I remember I uh, started off just, they gave me a few things to do for work, and then that was it. And it was like, okay, I'm painting a fence, and there's no extra teachings, there's no, you know, um, lots of sitting with other members of the Sangha. And it was really isolating. I was far away from Boulder. And so at the beginning, I was actually really kind of panicked about this and had to leave regularly. I was going to Boulder all the time to go hang out with friends, um, and felt almost a sense of like betrayal. But I stuck with it and eventually started to realize I needed to create my own structure and to really take advantage of this incredible environment, and started sitting a lot more on my own and with the people who were there, and more people started to live there, and more people, Corin, who was a and is a practitioner there, and yeah, and then over the years, there was the ordaining, and then it was time to leave. And that kind of happened really quickly. There was just something that changed. I can't exactly describe what happened, but there was some feeling in me that I was stuck in my practice and that I wasn't getting something. And so I left. And for a little while, I actually disengaged uh, you know, from the external Zen. I was always practicing. I was continuing to practice the whole time, but I wasn't seeing anybody, and I was wondering where I was going to end up. But then something also shifted, and it just felt like, oh, I can continue. I can come back, and I started seeing Gyodo Sensei at first, and then also started seeing Shishin and Roshi Shinko again, also over there. And something had changed again. And I can't even really explain all of this, but that something was opening and something was closing, and times were changing and things were changing. And now here I am here.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Tetsuji. Yeah, I wanted to explore that with Jodo as well. This description that Jodo just gave, which was really beautiful, of the openings and closings of different seasons and forms of practice, I think is really key. Actually, I think it happens to all of us, it's good to be attentive to that. It's very important to be attentive to what is really working for you, not for your idea of how you want your life to be, but for your sense of how your practice is deepening. Your teacher has a very close, intimate connection to that, but you also have a very deep, close, intimate connection to that. So that's your responsibility to really feel into what's working and what isn't, and with sincerity and humility, right? Not saying, well, this isn't working, so I'm going to go find the answer over here, but really to understand why it isn't working, and if a shift is needed. So yeah, thanks for describing that. I want to open it up. We're getting close to time, but if there's anybody else with a comment, question, or share, and it does look like Sokyo has one, so you've got the talking stick.
Thank you. So good to be with you this morning. And it's coming up, even in that last little section there, I was struck by when you were describing Jodo, this feeling of, oh, this is what I'm going to go do. And then being kind of clear, oh, it's now time for me to leave, but not fully understanding necessarily what or why completely, but knowing. There's a knowing there, and it reminds me in my own travels and my pilgrimage of that I go where I'm called and I move with what moves me. So it's a different kind of clarity. I wanted to ask you about how do you understand clarity now when early on you mentioned a real attachment to seeking clarity, but then how that attachment softened. And it reminds me of the koan where Joshu says, I do not dwell in clarity. But your response just now was like, oh, there was something that was clear. So clarity and clear, and how do you see that today?
It's interesting because in a way it didn't feel clear. It was just that something was happening, and in fact, I felt unhappy about it. I didn't want to leave, but something in me was ready to leave. It was kind of like there was both. So in a way, it wasn't really so clear. It was just this was unfolding, and I could feel it and in another sense, there was some clarity because it was just this. There was something happening, and it was moving me in this direction, and it was okay to go with that. In one sense, I want to say I don't understand clarity. But in another sense, I want to say it's just not something out there. And that clarity to me doesn't feel like it's important to hold on to because you can be aware if it's clear, you can be aware if it's unclear. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's cloudy. The sun's still shining, there's still life to be had, and it's not necessary to hold on to a state. I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, was that a good answer, Sokyo?
Yeah, well, I heard even that it's clear that it's cloudy.
Yeah, I like the question and your response, Jodo. I want to jump in on it too. You know,
Yeah, go ahead.
Master Joshu said, "I do not abide in clarity." You know, and it speaks to how we really do put this this priority on clarity. We want clarity so much. And, you know, we want understanding, but we also want orientation. You know, it gives us a sense of who we are. It gives us a sense of safety and a sense of the path ahead, you know, with some kind of, okay, confidence. But it's not always that way. It isn't. So we, you know, this path is one of disillusion and disillusion. Disillusion, you know, and you spoke to that in terms of your disillusion. You know, it wasn't what it wanted it to be. It wasn't what you expected it to be, you know, to live at the abbey. So you were disillusioned with that. And that's a real important part of practice, to go through that actually many times, to continually have our illusions, you know, dissolved. And that's the greater dissolution. We're not getting solutions. We're getting dissolutions in this practice. So our ideas are dissolved. Our plans and agendas are dissolved, and most importantly, our sense of ourselves, that fixed sense of ourselves, is dissolved, and we become intimate with our identity as the oceanic, you know, consciousness. So dissolution and dissolution. Clarity is just a part, right? That visual sense of like orientation around things are clear, but you spoke to this, Jodo, it's seeing clearly is one thing, but then having that inner motivation, and you use the word move. I was moved. That's the real important thing, is to feel into that. What is that deeper inner movement that wants to come forth from you, that wants to move forward, out into the world and out into connection. And there's oftentimes a lot of fear around that motiveness, that motion, and resistances. And, we don't want to be unsafe, so we sometimes want to hunker in. But it's always about, Shishin Roshi's mantra is always just keep going. So keep going, whether it's clear, whether it's not clear, whether it's cloudy, whether it is scary, whether it is rough, a path up versus, a path down, to just keep going, but to follow that motive impulse within yourself to continue the practice. I think that's the important thing.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
I just feel called to say that, for a very long time in my practice, I thought clarity was a thing, right? There was this sense that I needed to get what I didn't have, which was clarity or some sort of, sense of awakening, and that I didn't know it, but I was turning that into a thing. It was really kind of hard to see that I kept turning what is never anything into a thing to get in the future, and how that was, I don't know what to call it, like a dogged pursuit, but like a very, problematic way of approaching this life. Because if clarity is out there and it's something I need to achieve, then this can't be okay. And, then if I can't really rest into this as it actually is, well, then what is clarity anyway? I mean, it starts to defeat itself. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll invite others to offer a question. Just pop something into the chat. I'm going to ask Jodo. We're talking about fitting life into practice and practice into life, and I don't want people to have the impression that, okay, well, everything's my practice, so I can kind of do whatever I want, and formal practice doesn't matter. So I guess, that's a far extreme that I know nobody believes, but I just want to put that out there in a sense as a straw man, and just say, so how important is Zazen, formal Zazen practice, do you think?
100%.
Most important. Okay.
I don't know what I would do without it. Without Zazen, where would we be?
Okay. So, are you encouraging people to sit as much as possible? What's your encouragement to people?
I would say I did as much as I could, and I'm glad I did. I mean, I love sitting, and I'm planning on sitting as much as possible for the rest of my life. And I appreciate that way of life. So I can't say what each individual wants to do with their life, but for me, it really was a good thing.
Okay. Thanks. I wanted to hear you say that. And I say the same thing, sit as much as you can. This is the front door of the Buddha Dharma in our Zen lineage, and it's the main lineage of Buddhism that puts meditation at the front door. So, kiddo, I see you have a question. You've got the mic.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jodo, for sharing that deep path with me. I'm touched by that whole piece of trying to find this last discussion about what's clear. And I think the sense of not knowing really brought me to kind of letting go of thinking I had to plan my life and figure out what I'm supposed to do next. It's dropping into that not knowing place. And I think that's what you're describing. And my first Zen teacher said to me, I thought I was practicing so wonderfully. And she said, why don't you bring your life into your practice, or bring your practice into your life? And I looked at her and I was like, what is she talking about? And that has been my pursuit since then, was like, how do I do that? What am I missing? So there's a sense that I was missing something. Instead of what I'm learning or what I'm hearing is just sitting into the practice more deeply takes away all those questions. It seems like it becomes more clear the more you just sit, the more you just deepen into you and to what that sense of this is who I am. It doesn't have to come from somewhere else. It can come from within me, that reassurance that I'm okay, that everything is okay. And the more I sit and the more I feel that, then it goes into my life. It settles into my life. And I feel that any moment in my life where I'm really struggling, I just breathe and I go, oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. So that's how it helps me. But there's still a lot of pieces of that interpersonal connection that is really rugged and rough for me. And that's where my practice really comes into effect, is how do I deal with all those rough edges? So sitting helps a lot. But it's a mystery. There isn't an answer. It's just deep. To me, it feels deep practice really just settles all of those questions of not knowing and being with not knowing. Anyway, this has been really thoughtful and helpful.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kiddo. That kind of, did you have something to respond to that, Jodo? Or appreciate. Okay, yeah, I that stimulated me, Kyoto, to kind of look at this this matter of putting your practice, not fitting your practice into your life, but putting your life into your practice. You know, a way to think about it is that, well, do you fit breathing into your life? Do you plan to breathe at certain times and not other times? Okay, that's how you should think about practice. Practice is like that. It's at that level. But there's a level of your consciousness that doesn't think that way. You know, your egoic consciousness doesn't think that way. No, practice is something else. So you have to, you know, inspire and bring alive and awake that level of your consciousness, that being that knows that to be true, that this practice in this broad sense that we understand it to be is your bigger life, okay? And to start to identify with that as your bigger life. And then you're fitting the more time and space aspects of your life into that broader stream, just like you're doing all of the activities of your life while breathing. Right? It's the absolute just quality of your consciousness every moment of every day. I see your hand, but I saw Bruce had a question in the chat, so let's hand it to Bruce.
Thanks. I'll probably get emotional over this, but there was one word, Gyodo, that you put in, and I, you know, it's really what a difference a word can make. And you're discussing about validation and give yourself the Dharma seal and how to look at yourself, and you said to shine a warm light on wounded areas. And that one word, warm, is transformative. It says basically, you know, be kind to yourself. Don't come from an area of shame. And words that I had heard before was don't squander your life. If somebody says don't squander your life, I mean, that's like, whoa, that's like, oh crap. You know, I've wasted this one life, and when is it over? You know, it could be, and so I better get on with this and become goal oriented. And I think just shining the warm light felt so good and moved it out of an intellectual pursuit to a more of a holistic. And my main question about that is, I seem to get caught up a little bit, and I wonder what you both think about this, in thinking about things like, as a dichotomy of intellectually and feeling. And we've talked a lot today about you may not achieve clarity, and that shouldn't really be your goal. There are things about clarity that can be assistive, and I think Sokyo started touching on this idea about about clarity, but is that dichotomy that I sort of seem to practice now? Am I looking at this intellectually, or how do I feel about it? And what does it actually mean to feel it in your body and then trust yourself with moving forward without intellectualizing and picking a perfect, reasonable thing to do? It's like, is there more, are there more dimensions to this than just the mind-body dichotomy that you want to bring back together? So I think the dichotomy is useful because it tells you eventually I have to bring these two things together. Are there other dimensions to that sort of dichotomy that might be useful? I don't know if I'm explaining that quite correctly, but feeling things has become very important to me. How does it make me feel? Checking my body, what's my response, and then going ahead and moving forward into something. Anyway,
Jodo.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Jodo, you go ahead.
I guess what comes to mind for me is a simple example is like washing the dishes for me is when standing in front of the sink and washing dishes, there could be the sense that this mind, is washing the dishes. But an interesting thing has happened over time for me, which is that there's an just you can kind of step back or not even step back because that implies the dichotomy. But I find that the dishes can wash themselves. The dishes can actually tink, and make soaps and fuzzes and everything happens, and there's not necessarily a doer in that activity. And I would just encourage to see if you can find that is like a sense of, oh, I'm moving my hands or I'm walking forward, but there's not anyone doing that. I don't know, that's what comes to mind for me.
I'll weigh in just really, really briefly, Bruce, and just say the mind and body are not separate. Okay, that's your doing. And we study, our practice is to study ourselves to find the shared root of body and mind. Yeah. Shoen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, we're getting close to the end here, so I'll try to be quick. We talk about lineage all the time, and we always talk about it in terms of kind of like a conical thing that is behind us, and that we're at this point in time with all of this ancestry behind us. Pew Research puts the number of U.S. citizens who self-identify as Buddhists at about 1%. And of those, if you dig a little bit deeper down into Zen, there's north of 100,000, which is nothing. So my question for you guys is, with that conical thing behind us, it goes out in front of us as well. And what does responsibility feel like to you in terms of Zen in the West or in the U.S., and in terms of lineage and what it is that we're doing now and how this, 80 some generations of people have given their lives and labors that we may sit to get us here, and what is our responsibility going forward? Or is that more than a minute's worth of a question?
Go ahead, Jodo.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important and profound question that's difficult in some sense. It's so incredibly precious what we are receiving from this lineage, and from how I understand it, our best responsibility is to embody it, is to fully take it to heart and to live that life. And somehow, and maybe I'm not clear on this, but somehow that carries it forward, and we continue to create the circumstances which are necessary, the practices, the institutions, these kinds of groups, we're doing it, and I hope we're doing it well. That's all I can say.
Yeah, thanks, Jodo. My response, Sean, would be 100,000 is not nothing. 100,000 is 100,000. 100,000 is 100 million, is 100 billion, is 100 trillion. It's all beings throughout space and time. The 20 people on this call is not nothing. It's the point of 100 billion trillion beings, behind us, who are present right here with us right now. Absolutely. I want to honor the power of the lineage, that has given us the gift of this practice, right now. And I want to bring it alive and offer it to people in the future for sure. But it's not about numbers. I don't care what the number is. I care. I mean, I do care what the number is, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is the depth of the awakening. Yeah. Okay. And Tetsuji had a comment that Whitman, Thoreau, and Emerson were also Zen practitioners, which I agree with. Yeah. So we are at time, a little bit over. I want to thank you, Jodo, for sharing so deeply and beautifully. I hope this was interesting and helpful for everybody. And I'll hand the microphone back over to Sokyo.
Thank you both so much, and everyone here for your comments and sharing as well. I'm just always so moved with how these open up into what it did today. So thank you very much for your time and with great heart on this Valentine's Day. Just a couple of short announcements coming up, programs we have. This coming Tuesday is our new moon sit. So we've added, as of last month now, a sitting on the full moon and the new moon of every month. And Tuesday, the 17th, is the new moon. And the new moon sits are in the evening. So they're during the 7 o'clock to 7:20 normal sitting time. We'll have a short reading and then the sitting. And then the next week, Thursday the 26th, will be our first monthly now loving kindness meditation practice. We'll be doing at 6:45 p.m. before the 7 o'clock sit. And that's hosted by Gyodo and Sensei, who are here with us today. And thank you for bringing that into the Sangha as well. And our next Dharma dialogue is, let me just get the date real quick. I think it is March 14th. So next month, the second Saturday as well. We'll be back, I believe, to the regular time, 10 o'clock Mountain Time. And our guest for that month will be Bonnie Myotai Trace, who was formerly a teacher with Zen Mountain Monastery, and also the author of What is Zen? How to Practice Zen Buddhism. So we're looking forward to that. Mark your calendar for that. We'll be sending details out in email. That's on March 14th. Thank you both again, Sensei and Jodo. Be well, everyone. Take good care. Feel free to unmute and say goodbye.
Thank you, Sensei and Jodo.
Thank you both.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Valentine's Day.
Happy
Bye.
Valentine's Day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, guys. Bye.